We want to welcome everyone today to the series Answering the Call. Our special guest is Fr Kalantzis. He is a 1995 graduate, welcome home, Father, of Holy Cross School of Theology. But he's taken on a special mission that we want to talk to him about today. We'll ask him some questions, we'll pose some questions, and then we'll offer the opportunity to our students, our faculty, staff, admin, who are here to also offer their questions. This is really a very special series for us, Father. We welcome you to the campus.
Thank you, Father, for your gracious invitation and the opportunity to talk to the student body of Hellenic College and Holy Cross School of Theology.
Well, it's not often we see a uniformed gentleman on campus, unless somebody tries to burn the building down in the fire department. But we rarely don't have someone that comes to us from the armed services. So let me read a little bit about who you are so that our guests know. Father John is a priest of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, serving under the Homophron of Archbishop Demetrius. He was ordained to the priesthood in 1995. His first assignment was as Peristamenos of the Greek Orthodox Church of the Hamptons in the Archdiocese District. That must have been a tough assignment.
Oh, it was very challenging.
For the past 20 years, he has served on active duty as United States Navy chaplain. Father John has experienced a variety of assignments across the United States and overseas, including Japan and Hawaii, delivering ministry to sailors, Marines, and other service members and their families. He's been deployed aboard U.S. Navy vessels and with joint forces. He has attained the rank of captain, thus the uniform and the blame that you have there. He has attained that rank, and he currently serves in the Pentagon in the office of the Chief of Naval Chaplains as Director of Policy and Strategy. Father John has received numerous awards, which are mentioned in the release that we sent out to the student body. As we said, a Master of Divinity from Holy Cross in 1995. He and Presbytera Michelle are natives of Texas, and they have 3 grown sons, 2 born in Texas and 1 in Boston.
One Yankee in our midst.
One Yankee. Okay. Father John, let's start out. Tell us about your journey, because everyone has a story. Everyone has a journey, as everyone has their own fingerprint and their own soul. Tell us about Father John.
Well, I was a devoted altar boy in Dallas at Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church, and it was in my mind very early on to explore the possibility of being a priest. But that kind of faded as time went on, and I went to college, avoided going to law school, went to graduate school instead, worked in business for 10 years, but then my wife and a couple of mentors said, you know, you had that idea. What happened to it? And talked to some very influential priests in my life who encouraged me, and so came up here and went through the fantastic experience of being older students in a primarily at that time campus dominated by younger students.
That must have been fun.
It was a very interesting experience. The whole organization was learning how to cope with people who already had families. So it was a great experience to look back on.
You're very well put, Father. Very Navy.
It's called the torpedo. It goes under the water and it surprises you.
All right, so you are a commissioned officer.
Right.
In the Navy. Tell us about that.
So obviously the United States government doesn't train Greek Orthodox priests or rabbis or imams or Southern Baptist ministers. We have to come in already certified by our religious organizations. And I have proven that we can function in the religious organization as a leader. So 2 years of experience. So I was here for 3 years, from 92 to 95. Then I was assigned to a parish in Southampton, New York, as you mentioned. Was there for 2 years, and then I went on active duty. I received the officers receive a direct commission from the president to serve as an officer.
Who was the president?
Clinton was the president. Okay. Then the Navy does train chaplains, but they're not training them on religious matters. They're training them on how how to wear the uniform, how to salute, how to interact in the military environment.
Okay. Tell us, if you could go back a little bit to 1995, a little bit before that, and think about your experience here at the school. I won't ask you for your worst moment. I'll ask you for your best moment. What is the memory that is in your mind of the school?
We came in the fall of '92, and snow fell in the second week of November, and there was snow on the ground for the rest of the year, which for a guy from North Texas was shocking, to say the least. So we wore a lot of layers. Towards the end of the time, there was still snow on the ground, and had our oldest, who was, I guess must have been 4 years old, and we were out playing, and His Eminence was walking by, Metropolitan Maliotis, and Evan picked up some snow and nailed him. And he started laughing, and he said, "Well, Evan, I'm sure your dad will enjoy his assignment in Alaska." He nailed
That's a memory.
The timing was perfect.
Wow.
It was
That's precious. Okay, very good. All right, very good. So he had good aim. Let's go a little further now. You are the commissioned officer. You are then commissioned, as you say, on the ship.
Well, we attend the chaplain school, and then we immediately go to our first assignment. Our first assignment was in Okinawa, Japan. So we packed up our things in Southampton and ended up in Okinawa, Japan with
family and all?
3, 5, and 7-year-old boys.
Wow.
Yes. So the first step, if one was considering chaplaincy, one of the first steps, obviously, is a very in-depth conversation with one's presbytera. Don't even think about it until after you've had that conversation.
Okay.
Father Bill Bartz, my mentor and guide throughout this experience, gave me some very good advice from the very beginning, which was, whatever rank you may attain, presbytera is always one rank higher. So I'm a captain, that means Michelle is a navarchina. She's an admiral.
And she calls the shot.
Well, it is imperative. This is a team effort and a family experience. Before we made the decision to go on active duty, I was talking to a friend who was a military brat, and I asked him, wasn't it jarring to be uprooted as a kid and have to move all the time, all over the world? And his answer really made an impression on me. He said, "I have friends all over the world." It's an enriching experience. So for those who are contemplating chaplaincy and have children, there are challenges involved in moving every 2 or 3 years, obviously. But there's also some beautiful blessings that go along with it. Our sons are very close to one another. They're friends with one another because that was all they had when we moved. And then you can work on it to ensure that they're not uprooted at inconvenient times in their development. The 3 sons were able to do 3 years at least in the same high school. That entailed me going away and leaving them in place, but that's also doable. So there's ways to get the fullest out of the experience, even when moving around.
Tell us about you were deployed several times.
Mm-hmm.
You've been deployed land and sea, or I should say for you, sea, land, right?
Well, we take care of, the Navy Chaplain Corps takes care of the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard. So we have a variety of different venues in which to do our work. I deployed for the first time on an aircraft carrier. That was in 2001. So as we were rounding the tip of India on the aircraft carrier, that was 9/11/2001. So instead of going to the Persian Gulf, we went off the coast of Pakistan, and our pilots participated in the efforts against the Taliban, they were the first to fly 9-hour flights into Afghanistan, from the ship into Afghanistan and then back.
Was that the Tora Bora?
That was, I think that preceded that, right? This was the very beginning.
Initial bomb.
Mm-hmm. And so we had it was a very challenging and interesting deployment, walking on the flight deck at 2 o'clock in the morning as the young men and women were loading the bombs on the planes. And one time I was walking and one of the sailors came over and said, "Father, I just realized that these planes are going to fly tomorrow, and when they come back, the bombs are going to be gone. Because we train, and the bombs always come back." Right. But in this case, they were going to be dropped on people. And the question was, are we doing the right thing? And that's an example of the kind of ministry that you're able to do as a chaplain. We provide for our own. We are protected by law and policy so that we can not be forced to do anything which is prohibited by our religious organization. So I provide for the Orthodox Christians the sacraments and everything else you would normally do. We facilitate so that people of other faiths can find the resources they need. So if a Jewish sailor or Marine comes to me, I find them a rabbi chaplain to give them what they need, a Southern Baptist, a minister, what have you. And then we care for everyone. So that sailor who came to me, it was not a question of religion, it was a question of ethics and the law of war. And so we had a good conversation that, of course, was informed for me by our Orthodox understanding of the ethics of war. And I was able to reassure him. Caring for all is the prerequisite for serving in a pluralistic environment. And the military is a pluralistic environment. I don't know if y'all saw the Pew study that came out a few months ago, but it indicated that about half of the people under 35 years of age think that religion is a negative influence on society.
Yes, I've seen that.
Shocking. A shocking result. And of course, people who have that attitude serve in the military, as well as faithful people and everybody else. The military is a microcosm of our culture, of our society. So we're dealing with that. We're finding ways to be of service to everyone. And that's what it means. That's the prerequisite that the religious organizations and those they pick to serve must agree to, that they will serve in a pluralistic environment. For us, that means caring for everyone.
Okay. Let's go back a minute to what you said. I think was very profound what you said. At one point, the planes go and they come back with the bombs. Right? Mm-hmm. This time, the sailor asked you, or the pilot asked you, okay, we're going up, but they're going to come back without bombs, which means they've dropped on people.
That's right.
How do you deal with that? How were you able to counsel these people in dealing with that? That's a huge question.
It is. It is a huge question, but we answer it based on our understanding of the Orthodox tradition and what it teaches us, which is not the same as what most Western Christian approaches are. The idea of just war. That's not our approach. Our approach is that sometimes war is necessary. That doesn't make the things that happen in war not be sinful. Yes, it is a sin to kill. Sometimes nations order people to do that. But we have the sacraments, we have the way back to becoming whole again, and we use those things that have been passed down to us through the Holy Tradition to make people whole again, so that they can find forgiveness and move on. I think that there is a problem with the just war theory in that it doesn't comfort people. It doesn't give them the forgiveness that they require with the things that they've had to do in war. I think in this case, we have a better answer. And it's incumbent on us to proclaim it.
Now, when you go on these, I'll call them journeys, but they're more than journeys. You're in the theater of war, or the war theater. You perform services. You celebrate the Divine Liturgy. I happened to be in Washington, D.C. last weekend when you were there. We were there for the Orchid Day celebration. And I understood that evening, a special type of liturgy was to be celebrated there. Would you explain what that was? Because I know you were part of it as well.
This is a form of the liturgy which has been approved by the Archdiocese, which is truncated. And it's meant for use in the theater of war, on ships, and I also use it at the Pentagon every Wednesday. I celebrate the Divine Liturgy in the Pentagon. It's because wherever we find ourselves, there's not going to be a chanter or a choir or altar boys or anything else, just us. And so we rely on the congregants to read the responses. And it takes about a half an hour.
First tone, third tone,
No
fifth
tone.
tone, no tone.
No tone.
No tone.
No tone. I know that's scandalous. I hope you guys haven't freaked out. We read it.
And how long does it take to do that?
About a half an hour.
Oops, yes, sir.
With the sermon.
We're up to about 2 hours a little.
With the sermon. Half an hour.
With the sermon.
Yes.
Now, why the truncation? Why the shrinking it down?
Well, on a Navy ship, people are working 24/7. There are activities going on all the time. There's never a time when everyone is off. There is no Sabbath available because the ship is sailing, the mission is going on, the planes are flying, the mission is happening all around us. So we have to steal time wherever we can, and it's got to be used efficiently and effectively. So on the ship, I would do liturgy on Saturday night for the people who worked at night on their way into work, and on Sunday morning for the people who, vice versa. So we had to accommodate the life rhythm of the ship and still give the Orthodox Christians on board access to the sacrament.
So you have a situation where you're on land, possibly opening the Andimizio on a Humvee,
On the
and
hood of a Humvee.
and
That's right.
having a liturgy, or on a ship, aircraft carrier, like you said, maybe on a cargo box, you're opening the Andimizio.
Well, there's a chapel.
There's a
The
chapel.
carriers have small chapels,
Okay.
so we actually set up icons. We were able to, it's very luxurious. Paper icons, but yes, we're able to hang those up and celebrate.
Can you share with us, and I'm going to sort of climb into your heart for a minute, share with us one of the most profound moments that you remember in your time as a chaplain? Because I'm sure you've seen many, many things.
It is an extremely rich and varied experience to minister in the Navy. On that same first deployment, the rhythm of the fight caused the planes to be launched in daylight but return at night. And I don't know how many of you have been at sea, but being at sea is a profound experience in itself. Surrounded by water, confronted firsthand by the power of God, the creative power of God, the energy of creation, and the insignificance of humanity in relation to the whole creation when looked at from that perspective. And so the planes are taking off in the daytime, landing at night. Well, landing at night on a carrier is an amazing thing, because as you're coming down, and I've been in the back seat of a jet doing this.
Oh, you've flown on these things.
Yes,
Oh,
and I'm not going to talk about that because it was as I get older, my stomach becomes weaker and weaker, so just enough said. 6 Gs of force does terrible things to you.
Wow.
I was prepared. I had a baggie in every pocket of my flights, and I didn't eat for 24 hours before. But when they're coming down at night, trying to get that hook to catch a wire and stop the plane from going over the front end of the ship, it requires some courage. And on those nights when the moon wasn't out, pitch black, I found that I would always be asked several times during the day, "So, Father, are you going to be out on the platform tonight?" The landing signal officer platform is right next to the top of the carrier where the planes land. And so we would be standing here, and at the edge of the stage is where the jets are coming in and landing.
Oh.
And so I would stand out there in the pitch black and pray while they were landing. And I can tell you that that is some very focused and motivated prayer. When the power of the jet engine is within feet of you, and you know that those souls up there are alone in most cases, and they're trying to land on something that a few seconds before you land looks as big as a postage stamp. Just a few seconds before you're there and you're landing. Exactly, just drop down. And it was a fantastic experience to be able to be there for them, to reassure them, and to know that we call it ministry of presence. That means something to the people with whom you live and share meals and everything else on a carrier deployment.
I have two more questions before we open it up to everyone else. You obviously, how old are you?
57.
57. Okay. So you're 57 years old. It looks like you take pretty good care of yourself. And one of my issues with the seminarians is in the preaching classes and all the liturgics now and parish admin that I'm going to teach next semester, is the issue of the shepherd has to take care of himself first before he can take care of others. On an airplane, if you're going down and the airbags come down, they tell you to put the mask on yourself first, then you put it on your children. How have you stayed as you are? Your mind is sharp, you're in good shape. How do you do that, Father, with all the things that go on? Because we have trouble, I've had trouble in the past, balancing all these things in life. How do you balance it, Father?
Well, the extreme luxury we have in the Navy is they make you do it.
You write that
It's
down.
required.
Oh.
Every 6 months we take a physical fitness test. You have to be able to run 1.5 miles in a certain amount of time. You have to do a certain number of push-ups and a certain number of sit-ups.
How many? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, believe me, I can quote it to you exactly because I'm watching them. And the beautiful thing is, the older you get, the fewer you have to do and the more time you have to do the run. So I have embraced the 57-year milestone because I have to do fewer push-ups and sit-ups. As priests, if we cannot portray in our way of living the values and standards that we are preaching, then we have just undermined our ministry. So we have to be able to devote ourselves to a physical regimen, just like we do to a spiritual regimen, in order to proclaim the gospel in everything that we think, say, and do. To be, imastefagadas, we love our food. And only because of genes am I not having to worry about it. But nonetheless, we need to devote ourselves to self-control. Dispassion. How can we worship food if we're claiming to be dispassionate? We can enjoy life, we can enjoy the good things in life, but we shouldn't overindulge. And we should be just as disciplined about our physical aspect as we are about our spiritual aspect. Getting up and going to church every morning and every afternoon, as we do here, is a great luxury because it puts bookends on the day. It gives us a sense of structure. It's the luxury of the monastery without being in a monastery. The schedule of feasts and fasts is a program which, if we follow it, gives us structure. In the midst of the chaos of life, there's a routine. There's things we can count on. We should embrace it. We should embrace the fast. We should embrace physical fitness, just as we embrace our theological reading and our ascesis, our spiritual.
The balance of mind, body, soul, all of it. There's a lot of questions I could ask. I'm going to ask one more, and I want to give our students, because they have to go back to their classes. But the question that many students will probably ask is, I might want to be a chaplain someday. So could you go through the process? What is the process, let's say in today's world, if you graduate the school, how do you become a chaplain?
Well, you need 2 years of pastoral experience first. So you're going to get ordained, you're going to go to a parish, you're going to need the permission of your presbytera, and then the permission of your hierarch. The hierarch gives the blessing, Then the military endorser helps with the paperwork. You apply to the service to which you are applying, and it goes from there. The Navy requires that that the applicant have 2 years of pastoral experience, which doesn't necessarily mean you're the Proestamenos, but you need to have been a priest in a parish, because religious leadership is a prerequisite. You have to already have that, because the military is not going to train you to do that. You have to have a well-formed clerical identity, because you're going to be finding yourself in a variety of different environments, and if you don't know who you are, you can lose yourself. For us, this is not as big an issue, because we go through a lot of formation before we end up in the military. But for those denominations which don't have clergy, a minister, for example, who may have been a youth minister or you name it, some kind of ancillary position, who doesn't really have leadership and hasn't really developed that ministerial identity, it can be problematic. So that is a prerequisite. And then it's a competitive process.
It is.
We bring people in. There's an advisory group that interviews people every month or so. We have 15 or 20 people who come in and are interviewed. We ask hard questions about their ability to do ministry in a variety of venues, how they will deal with others. I think the extent of my experience dealing with people who weren't Orthodox was the local ministerial association in the Hamptons. I mean, there wasn't much there, but we are purposefully encouraging applicants to gain that type of experience of dealing with others, so that they're prepared for the pluralistic environment.
There are some who do certain things in their life and they say, well, I would never tell anybody else to do what I'm doing because I don't want them to go through what I've done. I don't sense that in you. I sense someone who is not only satisfied, but also humbled by the experience that you've entered into. Am I reading it correctly or not?
I think it's a very fair assessment, Father. I have found this ministry to be extremely fulfilling, very challenging. That's certainly not for everyone. But if you have a desire to serve and a willingness to adjust to a variety of ministerial venues, it's a very rewarding path. With the permission of your presbytera and the permission of your hierarch, you can have a very fulfilling ministry. And it's a different kind of ministry. The reality is that for us, it's a cut in pay to start as a military chaplain. I graduated from the school. I was appointed as a proestamenos. I took a 50% cut in pay to go on active duty. And it took me 10 years to get back to the level that I was being remunerated at. But during that time, we lived to places around the world. I served around the world. We met so many different people. I met priests' sons in Okinawa who were Marines. If I hadn't been there, who would have taken care of these people? There's no Orthodox church in Okinawa. We keep a Navy chaplain priest in Okinawa for that specific reason. We keep a Navy priest chaplain in Chicago at the Recruit Training Command because recruits aren't allowed to come off the base, and so Orthodox Christians who join the Navy don't have the opportunity without us there to receive the sacrament. It is a tremendously fulfilling, challenging ministry. There's a sense in which, and this is not always the case, nor should it be the case, but there's a sense in which a parish can be a bushel.
How so?
There's no outreach. And most parishes are not like this, but there's a potential for a parish to be a bushel under which is hidden the life of Christ. In the military chaplaincy, there's no bushel. You're out there shining brightly in the most unlikely of places. And you have the opportunity to influence people and bring people to Christ, although the environment is not a mission environment. Just by the fact that we're there, we're making a statement. First of all, that the United States has been very good to us, and we're giving back. We have a precious resource, our priests, and we're willing to send some into this ministry venue, not only for the good of the Orthodox Christians there, but for the good of everyone, for the good of the armed forces of the United States. So we're giving back to the United States of America. And we are shining the light of Christ in places where it really needs to be shown.
Oh, definitely. Father John, thanks for coming. Thank you for coming back home to spend some time with us as we celebrate here on the Holy Hill Veterans Day. We honor you. We honor all the men and women in our armed forces. We realize that freedom comes with a price, and it is something that we all enjoy. Many times we don't think about it. And I know as I've grown older, I will, when I travel and I see men and women in uniform, I stop to say thank you to them, because I know that the sacrifice is great. So we honor you, and we honor all the people that serve. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for your gracious invitation.
So now comes the fun. You can ask questions. If you have questions, who is has the microphone? Who is that? I can't see. Oh, okay. Anyone have questions for Father John? He's kind enough to fly up here from D.C., working at the Pentagon. That must be unbelievable. You weren't at the Pentagon. No, you were on the boat when it hit.
That's right.
Questions? Any questions? Any of you thinking about going? Oh, there's a question.
I think I'm going into the service.
You're going to service? We have applications for you. That's Dean Caves.
Father, welcome back to campus. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
If you could speak a little bit to the ministry that you've done to non-Orthodox Christians and non-Christians in a little bit more detail, that would really be very enlightening for us, because I think it is easy for parishes to become self-centered or to become focused on themselves, and perhaps our seminarians and our clergy don't have that much experience in dealing directly in a ministerial way or in a service-oriented way to people outside of their particular faith tradition. And if you could throw in there maybe like some of the more critical cases, because I mean so many people suffer trauma, and more we're recognizing how trauma is at the base of so many of the problems that confront people emotionally, and I imagine that you've seen quite a bit of that in the armed services. So if you can share a little bit about your insights in ministering to people outside of the church and suffering severe trauma.
Great questions. Thank you. It is etched in my memory forever. The first time when I went to Okinawa, I'm wearing the Marine uniform, I'm sitting behind my desk, the religious program specialist brings a Marine in, sits him down across the desk from me, leaves the room, shuts the door. We have complete confidentiality by Navy policy. Anything that someone shares with us that they expect to be kept confidential must be kept confidential by us. This has its roots in some religious organizations, but it is Navy policy. So regardless of the religious organization's stand, we have complete confidentiality. Those who come to us for help have complete confidentiality. So the Marine sits down. He's not Greek. He's not Orthodox, and he has a problem. And I'm thinking to myself, 2 years out of this august institution, after having dealt with the Greeks in Southampton for 2 years, what in the world do I have to say to this non-Greek, non-Orthodox Marine who's got a problem? Well, I know I'm supposed to actively listen. That's the one thing I learned in pastoral care. Actively listen. Yes, okay. It's a tremendous challenge to reach into one's very limited knowledge of the depth and breadth of our holy tradition, to find things with which to comfort people who are struggling but don't have the benefit of the faith. In fact, as we mentioned, may even be antithetical. Their beliefs may be antithetical to faith. So we have to really dig deep. But of course, what did St. Paul teach us? Go to them where they are. Yes, we can sit there and serve ourselves and speak theological platitudes. And they may be profound theologically. But they're doing nothing for this kid. Nothing. So you have to connect with the person where you find them. And this is not just true for Marines or sailors. This is true for anyone who comes to us for help. You have to find them where they are and connect with them. And then gradually build the kind of rapport that makes real healing possible. Now, are we social workers? Are we psychologists? No, we're not. But we know the systems. We know the resources. And we care about the people who come to us for help. That's the bottom line. We build trust through the shared experience of service. And then when they come to us, we listen. We validate their humanity. We don't judge them. And we try to find them the help they need. And you mentioned specifically trauma. Sexual assault, suicidal ideation. These things are ever present. We don't even talk about them in our parishes. Well, I certainly didn't for my 2 years in the parish. I had no idea. It's almost as if we think, well, that's a problem, to successors. We don't have that problem. Well, that's obviously false. We have the problem, we just don't talk about it. So suicide prevention, sexual assault response, we are trained to do these things. And it's a great blessing because I cannot imagine anything worse than a young person suffering terribly who does not have the means to articulate what is happening to them. And if we can help them, if we can ask, communicate our caring attitude, and then find them the resources they need, we've really done something. And that's true, I think, anywhere we serve. Whether you're a priest or a parishioner, being mindful of the wounds of the people around us, which may or may not be readily apparent, but with a little sensitivity.
And two, we don't live in the theater of wondering, although maybe that has to change now too with the shootings recently in churches, but we don't live with that constant possible fear of loss of life. Whereas a sailor, Navy, Air Force, whatever, you live in that theater of it could happen like that, and your life could be over, and your comrades, everyone with you could be gone. We don't live in that world. We live in a very nice little bushel, like you said.
Well, it's true that the pressure of life in the military yields a lot of stress, but it also yields opportunities to talk about profound things in a way that people can understand, in a way that's respectful of their beliefs or non-belief, but in a way that can give them the tools to adjust to a life of service and to grow up. Because so many of our young people, the average age on the carrier is 22 years old. I was very critical of my seminary buddies who were fascinated by youth ministry. And I argued vehemently that we shouldn't separate the body of Christ. We should be ministering to everyone. There's not youth ministry and elder ministry, and there's ministry. And this is the proof that God has a sense of humor. So what do I spend the next 20 years doing? Youth ministry. 19 to 25-year-olds who have never been spoken to about right and wrong, who have been brainwashed by the media to believe that there's no such thing as good and evil. I saw a commercial today on CNN. It was an apple, and it said, you can look at it from the right or from the left. It's still an apple. And I thought, that's wonderful. Because reality, our culture is in a state of denial about reality. Everything is relative. No, everything is not relative. There is truth. There is falsehood. There is good and there is evil. And we need to talk about it. Not to put anybody down, not to make categories, not to divide, but to empower people to live decent lives with a chance for happiness. If you don't even recognize that there's such a thing as good and evil, right and wrong, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to be fulfilled. None of those things are going to come to pass. So we have the opportunity to speak about the truth to people. And most times for us, these are people who are not Greek Orthodox, so their truth is going to be different from ours, but nonetheless, there's something that they can move toward. Long answer to a couple of very good questions.
That's a good question, good answer. Others, thank you. Any other questions? Yes? Who's that? Kathleen?
Yes. I just had, it may be something that is understood, but did you have to go through any kind of training in the military, like boot camp or something before you did?
Mm-hmm. There are several opportunities for training as a Navy chaplain. The initial opportunity, which is a requirement, is a basic school, and it involves learning how to operate in the organization, learning the rank structure, and even learning how to march, which is an ugly thing because as the Marine gunnery sergeants who train us to do that have often complained, we may be brilliant theologically, but we don't know our right from our left foot. So it's a source of many fond memories and lots of laughs. But we have the basic course, then there's an intermediate leadership course and an advanced leadership course at the chaplain school. We also have professional development training courses annually on a variety of subjects to include sexual assault, suicide prevention. This year it's ministry to the millennials, nuns and duns.
Nuns and duns.
Nuns and duns, right. So very nun, N-O-N-E-S, yes. Very interesting, a lot of material about social media. So we have that annually. That's generated by the Office of the Chief of Chaplains, so I participate in ensuring that the material is in alignment with our policy and is also in alignment with our long-term strategy.
Very good. Good question.
Great question, thank you.
Other questions?
So we also, before we go to the next one,
Yes.
I had the opportunity to spend a year at Marine Corps Command and Staff and earn a master's in military science. So they send us to school for a year once we make a little rank, and you can gain another degree and learn more about the institution in which we're serving. So when I was a junior chaplain, I looked up and looked around and thought, there's some problems with the chaplain corps. And then I had the opportunity to serve in Iraq well, I went to the Chief of Chaplain's office and I learned that it's not the chaplain corps, it's the Navy. Right? Then I went to Iraq and I realized it's not the Navy, it's the military. And then I went to Command and Staff and studied the whole government, and I realized it's not the military, it's the whole government. And then I realized that I came back to the beginning of what I learned here. It's human nature. Bureaucratic behavior.
Yes.
Somehow bureaucracy brings out the worst in humanity. It's a strange thing.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, in the back. Father Gregory, is that
Yeah,
you?
that is.
Okay.
Father, along those lines, I often think about a few people that I've really admired, a few priests that have been able to somehow be fantastic priests while navigating the system. They're with high power people. They're with people that make a lot of money or people that are in high power positions, and they're able to create movement and make things happen somehow without being tainted by the system, so to speak. So can you talk a little bit about being at the Pentagon and being around high power people, and how are you able to sort of wear two hats, two uniforms, so to speak, the one you're wearing and your priestly at the same time, and how is that a conflict at times, or how are you able to navigate that kind of sometimes contradictory roles?
That's a great question, Father. Thank you. Our khaki uniform that we wear has a cross on one side of the collar and the rank device on the other side of the collar. So we often talk about the balance and the tension between being a staff officer and being clergy. In the position at the Pentagon, working policy, we have the opportunity to advise the decision makers on how religion is going to be accommodated in the military. It's a fascinating discussion. Congress has equity. That's a series of administrations from diametrically opposed sides of the political spectrum have had equities, and religious ministry policy has been buffeted by all these influences. And then there are the inherent equities of an organization which has a mission. The courts have generally allowed the military leeway in the interpretation of regulations and laws based on the military's assessment of how it's going to affect the ability to accomplish the mission. The Attorney General recently released a memo in which they summarized the laws regarding religious accommodation and interpreted them in such a way as to strongly emphasize the requirement that federal agencies accommodate religious practices and religious exercise. Well, the military doesn't want to. The military wants to focus on mission accomplishment and not to spend a lot of time and effort figuring out how to accommodate religious practices. So there's a tension there, a real tension. And this highlights the fourth capability that we have as chaplains, and that is advisement. We advise at the tactical level, we advise commanders about their unit. What is the morale? What are the issues that are coming up? Is there a section that has a problem? Is there a leader, a junior leader who's doing well or not so well? Because we're moving around the ship or moving through the battalion on a regular basis, talking to everybody, we have a sense of what's going on, and that can be communicated without identifying any individuals. That can be communicated to the chain of command. So we help the unit function better. We are non-combatants. We don't carry weapons, and we don't advise on targeting or anything else. We are, by the Geneva Convention and by Navy policy, we are non-combatants. So we have an enlisted person who is a combatant, who's with us to protect us when we're traveling in combat.
So when you were in Baghdad on the ground, you had someone with you?
Right. I had an RP. As I was traveling around Anbar province by truck or by helicopter, I always had an enlisted with me who was armed and able to protect me if the need arose. So we advise at the tactical level. We also advise at the strategic level about issues like religious accommodation generally. So we are advocates for religion. At the same time, we understand that the mission's got to be accomplished. So our challenge now is to find a middle ground between the services, the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, who's made this interpretation of law, Congress, and the administration. Wow. It's fascinating, fascinating stuff. Great question. Thank you, Bob.
Others?
Hi, Father. Thank you. Back here in the back.
James.
I'm curious about your relationship. You spoke about the relationship with the people on the deck, but how about the people up in the commanding tower, so to speak? So what is your pastoral relationship with them, and how accessible are they to you and you to them?
By Navy regulation, we have direct access to the commanding officer wherever we serve. By regulation. So in a sense, we don't have to do anything to get it. But we can squander it very easily. So on the Navy ship, every night before taps, there's a moment for evening prayer. And on the carrier, the chaplains take turns delivering a very short prayer. And we try to make them germane to what's been happening during the day on the ship and give some sense of completion to the day. And after we deliver that short prayer, it's delivered from the bridge on the 1MC, which is the speaker system that goes through the whole ship. After the prayer, we stay on the bridge. We often stay on the bridge, and we have time to go over to the captain's chair. He may be watching air operations take place. That's probably what's going on. And to just stand there and see if this incredibly busy person who literally doesn't have a moment of time that's not spoken for needs anything. What is his state of mind? Where is he in all of this as a human being? And I have to tell you that there are some profound moments in that very strange environment where every word he says is law, and the lives of so many people are in his hands. And there you are. You've just prayed for everyone, and he knows you're there. He's very busy. But the exchanges that you can have, very brief but meaningful exchanges that you can have there, are very special.
Thank you, Father. Father has to go to catch a plane, a quick plane, back to the Pentagon and back to DC and back to his family. Father John, again, thank you very much for being here today. Thank you all of you for being here.